What is up, everyone, and welcome back to part 2, where I am going through and ranking all the movies that I've watched over the past couple of years. If you didn't get a chance, I'll link below part 1 of this video series, where I went through the first 50 on this list. We have a long way to go, so we're going to keep moving forward, and if you wanted like an explanation of how I got into this journey, make sure you watch part 1 of this. But let's dive right into this, where we can move forward and get these videos ranked. Alright, so the last movie that we watched was A Separation, an Iranian film, so we're moving on next to Django Unchained. Now, once again, I was fairly new to Tarantino movies at this point, and this film was, at the time, I appreciated what it was, but like I did with Kill Bill, and as I think back on Tarantino films, I would definitely see this as looking at it more fondly. I thought it was well acted by Jamie Foxx and the rest of the people that were in it. I think Leonardo DiCaprio was in this and a few other big names. So this was definitely one that, was I'm going to put it worth seeing once. Not necessarily a great movie, and I don't know that any of Tarantino's films will fall in as great movies for me or above, but it's definitely worth seeing once. The next movie is A Clockwork Orange. This has a huge cult following, and I saw it. The premise was just weird. The premise was kind of foreshadowing or foreboding, and just a very odd story about the overreach of power and this dystopian future type situation. And for me, it was as odd as I thought it was. I think it's definitely one that's worth giving a watch. So that's what I'm going to put there. I don't want to put it in meh. It was definitely a very interesting premise, but not necessarily one that I'm not going to go back to it over and over and over again. But if someone really wanted to like see this and to experience, I'd probably watch it with them again just to give it a second watch. So that's where I'm going to put that. The next movie is Snatch. Snatch falls in line with movies like Lock, Shock, and Two Smoking Barrels and things like that. It's just this kind of gritty type movie, but I don't think, and it's been once again a long time since I watched this, but I think I'm going to put this in meh for me. I think I liked it a little better than Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and that type of movie, but it's still not something that I'm not going to go back to it over and over again, that's for certain. The next movie is Mystic River. This is Al Pacino, and I forget who else is in this. And it's just kind of a crime thriller, drama, or not drama, but basically a crime story, crime thriller. And I would definitely say that this is worth seeing once. I remember the story being engaging, that it kept me interested through the entire story, so I would definitely say that falls in worth seeing once. And I'm going to try to move through these a little quicker as we move forward. The next one is The Hunt. I forget what nationality this film is. This story is basically of a guy who gets accused of sexual inappropriateness with children, and it's his experience and his story as he tries to clear his name. And it's a very heart-wrenching tale, I guess, and I would definitely put this in the worth seeing once category. Next, another Tarantino film. This is Inglourious Basterds, and for me, once again, Tarantino, the gore in it is comedically overdone, and the story is just entertaining, for the lack of a better way of putting it, so this is going to go into worth seeing once as well. The Pianist. This is another World War II type film about this pianist who is Jewish and ends up in the thralls of everything going on during that time. I would definitely put The Pianist as a great watch. It's a very interesting story, a very engaging story about just the horrors of World War II and his experiences and trying to escape being captured, and just a great watch for me. The next is 12 Years a Slave. It tells the story of an African-American man who basically gets sold into slavery. I believe he was a musician, and just his experiences in trying to find his way back to his family as he got separated from them. This easily goes into a great watch, one that I wouldn't mind watching again at some point. probably in the near future. Worth the time, I think it was pretty lengthy too, but definitely worth giving a watch. The next one is Some Like It Hot, and this is, I think, Marilyn Monroe. I forget who the other two actors are. I'll put them on the screen here. This for me was just meh. It's an older movie. It's reflective of the time that it came out. I forget the exact year, but it was just kind of meh. It's a comedy, but I think two guys pretend to be women or something. I forget the exact storyline, but just gonna put it in meh for me at this point. The next is, I think it's Stanley Kubrick, and you're gonna find a pretty consistent theme with Stanley Kubrick movies. Sorry, not Stanley Kubrick. My mistake. This is Francis Ford Coppola. This is a probably never again for me. This was just a weird movie, and I know that's the whole point of it. It's a war movie, and just how a military leader kind of went off the deep end. I think this had Marlon Brando in it, who played the military guy that they were after. Just probably never again. Did not enjoy this movie. And it's one of those movies, as I watched it, every moment I could, the movie felt like every moment, and that's not really a great thing for me. So just not my thing. The next movie is North by Northwest. This is a probably never again for me. It was long, at least it felt long when I was watching it, and it just wasn't that engaging of a story for me. I think this is like known as a classic, and it may have some awards or whatever, but I just didn't care for it, and it was just a long movie. The next, another Tarantino. Man, these Tarantino movies really like clashed or came up against one another within a very short period of time. I don't think I did that intentionally. I think that's just the way the wheel ended up working. And I'm gonna put this in meh. This is probably my least favorite of the Tarantino films. I don't think any of his other ones are down below this. For me, I just didn't. And maybe this warrants a rewatch for me, but I just didn't care for it. I know this is another one that has like a huge cult following. People love this movie and speak highly of it. I just did not care for it. So it's going to go for meh at this point, and that's where we're going to put it. Next, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Admittedly, this has a lot of nostalgia to it. This is definitely... I won't put it at a great watch, and the reason I'm not going to put it at a great watch, because yes, it's funny and it's stupid humor, and that's my kind of thing. Like, I really enjoy that type of humor, but for a lot of people it's not going to be their cup of tea. But I'm going to put this as worth seeing once. This is one of those cultural movies that you're going to find references to all over the place, and it's quotable. There's a lot of stuff in it that is really funny and enjoyable, so that's worth seeing once. Next is American Psycho. I am going to put this one at worth seeing once. I don't know what to say about this one. What I came to find out about Christian Bale movies is that, much like Russell Crowe, Christian Bale is Christian Bale in all of his movies. He doesn't really take on a different persona. This one may have been his most out of the box role, as he just plays this sociopath, psychopath, whatever it might be, who goes around murdering people. And it was worth seeing once. I remember it was engaged. I don't usually watch stuff like this, but this was worth a watch, at least seeing once. The next ones, and this is before I made the decision that I'm going to group these two together just to kind of save time here. But this is before I started if I end up on a series, I'm going to watch through the series. Thankfully, because this would have taken me forever, but I know it's coming. And that would be Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. Now, I don't know, because of how small these are, which is which. I think the first one, well, obviously I watched Infinity War before Endgame. So, for me, Infinity War was a great watch, and then I'm going to put Endgame at worth seeing once. And the reason I do that is because, for whatever reason, not that Endgame was bad, but between Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame, this is when you started to seeing the Marvel Universe shift for the worse. And so, while there's the whole plot line of Tony Stark and bringing his story to an end and all of that, I just thought Infinity War was better told and just better done versus Endgame. That's just me. So that's where those movies are gonna lie, as a great watch for Infinity War and worth seeing once for Endgame. The next is The Apartment. This is, I'm forgetting his name. He was in Grumpy Old Men with Walter Matthau. I forget the guy's name, but it's a comedy. It's about a guy who has an apartment that people rent out for basically sexual promiscuity type stuff. This was a meh for me. It had funny parts. It was not bad as far as a movie goes, and I think I would kind of line this up with Some Like It Hot. Not that they were bad, and I think the main actor was in both of these, I believe. But it's just not something that I'm going to go to over and over and over again. So that's just for me. Next is On the Waterfront. Now, this movie, I think, has won a bunch of awards. This is this Marlon Brando? Yeah, so this is Marlon Brando in another one of his roles. I did not like this. I didn't care for this movie. And so for me, it's going to fall into Probably Never Again. Keeping in mind that when I say Probably Never Again, I might eventually watch this, but that's just not my cup of tea. The next one is Full Metal Jacket. I know this is cultural. There's a lot of like clips and memes and stuff that are out there about this movie, and I'm trying to remember the exact plot line for it. So for me, I'm gonna put this as meh. Once again, it's a war movie, and I think if I saw clips again, I would remember more of this. But okay, so this is Stanley Kubrick, and I don't know if you're gonna find, I could be wrong because I don't remember exactly what every one of Kubrick's movies are, but you're probably not gonna find many Kubrick movies that are gonna rank high for me. Just spoiler alert on that. So Full Metal Jacket falls as a meh. This may be one that may warrant a rewatch at some point in the future, but for me, that's just where this falls. The next movie is The Searchers. So this, I believe, is my first introduction to John Wayne as an actor, and this, I don't typically come down on older movies for the content that's in them, but this movie specifically was just John Wayne as one of the most racist human beings on the planet, and I just did not really care for this. So we're gonna put this in Probably Never Again. Not a great introduction as far as John Wayne goes for a story, but what are you gonna do? I just didn't care for this one, so that's where that's gonna fall. Next is Platoon. I don't remember much about this movie, if I'm completely honest with you. This is another one that I think has high regard with different people, but for me, I don't remember it. I seem to recall that I didn't care for it when I watched it, so I'll put it in meh, just because, once again, and I'd have to look up and see what the exact plot line was to this, which I just did. And yes, I do remember this movie. It's a war movie. Keeps you on the edge of your seat, sure, but it's just not my thing. It's not something, you know what? I do remember this now more than as I'm talking about it. I'm going to move it up to worth seeing once. So I just contradicted what I said a couple minutes ago. So I got a war movie that did go into worth seeing once, which there might be a few of them. Yeah, Saving Private Ryan is up there. So worth seeing once for Platoon. Definitely an interesting story. I think once again it's another story of how power gets to someone's head and how they have to kind of take that person down. The next movie is Witness for the Prosecution. Now, if I remember right with this film, this was worth seeing once. Yeah, I remember talking to somebody about the actor that plays the lawyer in this, and they didn't care so much for the actor. But it's a courtroom drama type film, which I usually enjoy, especially when it focuses largely on the courtroom aspect of it. this was worth seeing once. And it gives you a little twist at the end, which is always interesting in movies. So for me, I thought this movie was decent, and therefore it falls at worth seeing once. Next, we enter into the Indiana Jones movies. Now, these are going to fall at different places, and I think most people are going to agree with at least to some degree, where these may fall. And for me, and maybe not, that's fine too. So, for me, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great watch. And Temple of Doom was meh. And The Last Crusade is also a great watch for me. I think for me, for whatever reason, the Last Crusade, which should have been The Last Crusade and just left it at that, I just liked that one more than Raiders of the Lost Ark. Raiders was good, but for me, but I don't know if I'd put it in an all-time favorite movie. It kind of like treads that line between a great watch and an all-time favorite. There are times where, like, if I'm going through and just looking for something to put on, I'd throw this on. It's just one of those movies. Even for background noise, it's a good film. So that's where I would put all of those. Next is Thelma and Louise. This is worth seeing once. Sigourney Weaver, and I forget who else is in this. Interesting story. I think it's a retelling or a remake of an older film, if I'm not mistaken. But it was well done. It was an interesting story. So I would put that in worth seeing once. Next is Ben-Hur. This is like touted as the epitome of cinematic masterpiece. It is long though, and for me, it's worth seeing once. You have to carve out an afternoon for this, but it's a good story. It's well acted. I don't remember who's in it, but I remember the story being decent. And it was a lot to go through to watch it, but it's definitely worth seeing at one time. It is one of those films, as far as cultural significance, that's worth taking the time to see at least one time. The next one is The Great Dictator. Now, this is Charlie Chaplin, and I believe this was my first ever interaction with actual film footage of Charlie Chaplin, and I know he's got a lot of controversy in his past and all of that. This was just full of goofy nonsense slapstick comedy type stuff, which is what he was known for. Majority a silent film, I think. There's some speaking here and there, but I know this gets a lot of credit for his ultimate speech at the end of the movie about just the dangers of dictatorship and that type of thing. And so for me, that kind of puts it in that worth seeing once. It's silly, it's goofy. It's going to be hard for me to put any other Charlie Chaplin movies even in this category as we move forward, but for this one, I think it's worth seeing it one time or another. Next is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So another Western. This is Clint Eastwood, and this one's worth seeing once. I remember enjoying this movie more than I thought I would. I've never been a big Western guy. This is one that I believe, aside from Eastwood, I think all the actors are Italian or something like that. And so just seeing the voiceovers is interesting in the midst of this. So worth seeing one time. Next is Casino Royale. If you like spy movies, if you like James Bond movies, then this is going to be higher on your list. I'm okay with them. Daniel Craig in this one. I haven't watched any of the old James Bond movies. Got stuck there for a second. But this is worth seeing once. I've seen this one a couple times, actually. The story's engaging. It's your spy thriller type story. And this might be the only James Bond movie that I've watched in the past 2 years. That's just kind of the way that it works. I have other ones on there, I think even some of the older ones, but Daniel Craig did a great job. I think he was a good casting choice for James Bond. And so this is just a series that studios recognize they can put new faces on there and make money off of it. So I'm sure there'll be more of those in the future. Next is Wizard of Oz. This is obviously culturally significant. It's a huge deal. I'm going to put it in worth seeing once. And that's all I'm really going to say about it. If you don't know the Wizard of Oz story, then you need to get out more than I do. That's just kind of what it is. So this is worth seeing once at least. I wouldn't put this as a great watch. It's not one I'm going to run to, but I've watched it a few times in my life, and yeah, it was fine. Next is Slumdog Millionaire. This one, I'm going to put this in worth seeing once. Very interesting premise, and definitely worth taking the time to view this at least one time in your life if you can get a chance to. I think this is, I can't remember, is this highly subtitled? I don't remember exactly, but definitely worth giving a watch. Next is Notorious. I remember nothing about this movie, probably never again. I seem to recall not liking it at all. I don't remember what I ranked it on Letterboxd, and so that's just gonna fall probably never again. Next is Network. This was a great watch. This was interesting on many different levels, just because it speaks of the media, it speaks of who controls the media. It gives a whole tirade about how, at the end, about how money is what runs truth and that type of thing. And yet, even today, people don't see that that's what's happening. So, great movie, great watch. Definitely worth giving the time to watch that one. The next one is Hotel Rwanda. This is a great watch. This is a heartbreaking tale about the massacres or genocides in Rwanda. And Don Cheadle plays hotel employee, I think. I don't remember if he's a manager or what he is with that, but who gets caught up in the middle of all of this, and it's just his tale of trying to keep the hotel running and yet dealing with the travesties that are going on around him. Great watch, definitely worth the time. I enjoyed watching this one quite a bit. Next is Parasite. This gets all kind of acclaim. I think I even ranked it pretty high on Letterboxd, and so, but I don't know how much of that was maybe influenced by just what others had said about it. It was an interesting tale. I think it's a Korean film, and I think it's definitely worth seeing once. And while this may not reflect the rating I gave it on Letterboxd, I may drop that rating, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. It was a good story, and it was very interesting of this guy who leeches off of a wealthy person and a family that does this as well. Just kind of interesting take on society, I guess, but it's definitely worth seeing at least one time. The next one is Alien. So this is the first one, my first interaction with Alien films, and for me, this is worth seeing once. It's not too bad as far as it technically falls in the horror genre, but there aren't too many jump scares, and the ones that are, because it's an 80s movie, they're very 80s jump scares. And so the more frightening thing I remember from this movie is the cat that jumped out more than the alien. So definitely worth seeing once. Yeah, I thought it was well done. Good story. Next is The Grapes of Wrath. Now this one's interesting. I read the book, and it's a really depressing book. The movie isn't any more depressing, or isn't any less depressing, aside from Camptown Races is in this movie over and over and over again. But I seem to recall that it was fairly faithful to the book, and I would say this is worth seeing once. Even if you haven't read the book, it's worth seeing at least one time. This is going to be massive. Alright, so the next one is Blade Runner 2045. 2049? I forget. The recent iteration of Blade Runner. And I put Blade Runner down in meh for me. I liked this one better, and it could be just because it was more modern. That could be the situation. I will put this at worth seeing once. It brings Harrison Ford back in his role, and it also has Ryan Gosling. Ryan Gosling, I'm finding that I'm hit or miss with Ryan Gosling as far as his roles. There's just something about his on-screen presence that just seems vacant to me. And maybe that's his appeal for a lot of people. But I would put that at worth seeing once. Next is Blood Diamond. And for me, that was meh. I think a lot of people like this movie, and once again, it deals with some heavy content matter. The mining of diamonds in Africa and the prices that are paid, people's lives given just to acquire these diamonds. And so for me, it just kind of falls in that meh category. I don't know that I would ever watch this film again. Next is Spotlight. This is a story that deals with the sexual allegations against the Catholic Church, and this would definitely fall in worth seeing once. Another great telling, another news reporting journalist type story, so definitely falls in worth seeing once. Next is Ghostbusters. A lot of nostalgia goes into this, so I try to weigh that in to what we're dealing with here. And so for me, worth seeing once. And yes, in my life, I have great memories of this franchise. I wish they had done more with it back then. And I haven't seen any of the new ones. Well, at least in the last couple of years, I haven't watched any of the new ones. We'll see when I get around to watching the other ones, how they actually hold up in terms of this one. But I remember liking this one a lot, worth seeing once. So that's where I'll put that. Next is Papillon. And for me, I think this was another long one. I think Dustin Hoffman is in this one. I believe so. And I'm going to put worth seeing once for a lot of worth seeing once in this string of 50. I think most of them have ended up here. But that's alright. So that is worth seeing once. I forget the exact story plot lines, but I remember it being a decent watch, even if it was lengthy, about a guy that gets imprisoned and takes on this interest in butterflies or something. I'm really not doing great with explaining the plot of this movie, and it's basically his attempts to escape, I think is the whole point of it, and it's worth seeing one time. The next movie is Heat. I don't remember a lot about this movie, to be honest with you. The plot points escape me as far as what it is. Yeah, even taking a moment to just kind of glance over the plot line, I don't remember anything about this movie. So we're going to put that in probably never again. That may warrant a rewatch, just because I don't remember anything about it, so that may not be fair to this movie. So, you know what? Let me move it up to meh, just because I don't want to be that harsh on it. It's probably better than I'm remembering, or not remembering, I should say. But it just, to me, if a movie doesn't stand out in terms of plot and that type of thing, granted there are a lot of movies I've watched here, so I'm not going to remember the plot of every one of them. But for me, I'm going to put it in meh, just to be safe there. It may be better than that, and if I ever give it a rewatch, I can update this. It's not a problem. Next is The Nice Guys. This got recommended to me on a Discord server that I was part of. At one point, there was some roulette thing they were doing or whatever. And this is Russell Crowe and Ryan Gosling. Worth seeing once. It was funny. It's like a buddy cop comedy type movie, and well acted, interesting story. So I would put it at worth seeing once. It's not anything groundbreaking or incredible, but it was worth a watch. My First Summer, this is another one of those that was a roulette type thing, and so this is not the type of movies I typically watch, especially since it deals with the romantic lives of young girls. I'm going to put this in meh. So the next movie is My Blue Heaven, and this is Steve Martin and Rick Moranis. And I always love me a good Rick Moranis film. This one was goofy, this one was off the wall. Steve Martin plays an over-the-top character, as he typically does. And so I'm going to put this at worth seeing once. It was fun. They certainly don't make comedies and movies like this anymore. And so it stands the test of time as far as just interesting movies to watch, considering they just don't make them this way anymore. Next one is Holiday. And for me, like a lot of these older films, it's going to be a meh. That's where I'm going to place this. This was Katharine Hepburn and Hugh Grant. Not Hugh Grant. That was Cary Grant. Hugh Grant's a modern actor. Cary Grant was the older actor. So, was kind of meh. I think it was an okay story, and yeah, I don't remember a whole lot about it, but I remember I was okay with it, but it wasn't really a film that stood out. The next one is The Kindergarten Teacher. This I'm gonna put in probably never again. This was just a weird story of this. This is Maggie Gyllenhaal, a teacher that's really just disillusioned with her whole life and encounters this protege of a child who's really great with poetry. She never took off as a poet, and so she kind of takes the kid under her wing, but in a very creepy way, to the point where she like kidnaps this kid at one point. It's not a thriller. It's just a weird story, and so for me, that's gonna fall in probably never again. And surprisingly, as quickly as we got through this, yeah, so finally for the last film that we're going to put on here, it's going to be The Flowers of War. This is Christian Bale again. It tells the story of a military official. I can't remember exactly his role, but it takes place during a war. I don't remember exactly which one. And his efforts to basically protect a group of women. Once again, I don't remember the exact plots. I remember this film being okay and worth a watch, but once again, what kind of takes you out of it is Christian Bale being Christian Bale. And so for me, worth seeing once. And it kind of wavers between worth seeing once and meh for me. So that ends this group of 50, and that brings us to 100 films. I may have to figure out another alternative here in terms of the list to clear this out and start over for the next 100, just because this is going to get to be too full. But who knows? Maybe I'll just keep going and we'll just scroll back and forth and do it that way, so we have just one mega list of all these movies. So, but that takes us to 100 films, and make sure that you like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comments below of any of these that you think I should really give another watch and give another chance, or what do you agree with, what you don't agree with, what movies. Well, it's hard to put what movies you think I should watch because I have a whole list of them. I haven't been able to watch any in a few days, but we'll get back to it eventually. So with that being said, thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you in the next part. Bye.